There is a balance to the universe. The struggle to maintain that balance is the stuff of legends.
On December 13th, 1985, Legend was released theatrically by 20th Century Fox in the UK, and released on April 18th, 1986 in the US by Universal Pictures, but more on that later in the video. Directed by Ridley Scott. Not the Dragon Space Pirate, that's Ridley, though I can see the resemblance. Talking about the director of Exodus, Gods, and I'm talking about the director of Alien and Blade Runner. Fresh off the success of those movies, Scott decided to direct a live-action adaptation of The Legend of Zelda. Except he didn't, and it's not. It's similar though. It kind of bombs at the box office, but now it's considered a cult classic. Kinda. And with Nintendo not giving a shit about The Legend of Zelda's 35th anniversary...
I'm sure a lot of you saw me and thought there might be news about the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild game. Unfortunately, we don't have anything to share right now. We apologize.
Hey, listen!
I thought it'd be a good idea to check out the closest thing we have to a movie adaptation. So join us as we take a look back at Legend.
But I turned off like any, so like I had like a little filter running in the background just to minimize.
Oh, you're killing
the
the fish again?
I'm killing the fish in the name of art.
Excellent.
I do have something to say about this movie. Watching it and then kind of like going back and like doing some reading on it, the Wikipedia page was actually more interesting than the movie.
Okay.
I have some opinions.
All right. You ready?
Yep.
All right. I'm Jacob from Film Reel.
Hey guys, this is Justin from Film Reel.
And today we're taking a look at the 1985 or 86, depending on where you lived, cult classic Legend. A director's cut of this film exists, but we'll be taking a look at the theatrical cut, since I'm sure that's what most people have seen, at least Americans, but more on that cut later. The movie stars Tom Cruise unibrow as Jack, and he plays a forest-dwelling mortal boy who sets out to stop the Lord of Darkness after he kidnaps Lily, Princess Lily, and steals a sacred unicorn horn, and that shrouds the world in like a winter darkness. And along the way, Jack encounters fairies and dwarves and goblins and monsters in his path to save the universe and bring back light into the world. So right off the bat, I think the movie kind of sets the tone and the atmosphere of this world that they created, and the opening crawl explains how before time existed, there was nothing but darkness, and then love came to be in the universe, and the Lord of Darkness was banished in the shadows, and the light, the goodness in the world is protected by unicorns, and all this while the soundtrack is playing this really mystical, kind of fantastical music. It's a little cheesy, I know.
That's what I thought. I thought it was like some wannabe like Star Wars intro.
Well, see, that's what I was thinking too. I was like, I wonder how many movies opened up with a crawl after Star Wars did.
Mm-hmm.
6 extraordinary teenagers.
It opens up like that, and then it's followed by a few shots of the forest, and the whole thing kind of feels very mystical to me, very arcane.
I actually feel like with the way they designed the set, the forest actually seems very alive to me. It doesn't seem like fake. They did a really good job at like kind of like making this look real.
It's super lush, and there's always something going on. There's always something flying around. It's very dark fantasy, kind of like Willow or Labyrinth. It was really popular in the 80s. And then it cuts to the Dark Lord's fortress, and people are getting chopped up and
This
tortured.
was actually surprisingly gruesome.
Yeah. So you get your first look at the Dark Lord right there with his rave fingernails. And then you see the Dark Lord's companion, Blix.
The goblin, right?
Yeah.
Are you not the most loathsome of my goblins?
Truly, master.
He's
And is
disgusting.
your heart black and full of hate?
Black as midnight, black as pitch, blacker than the foulest witch.
Ugh. Yeah, Darkness looks really good to me, actually. I think it's all practical, and it's aged really well. And I was looking at him, and I actually thought he looked a lot like, well, it's probably based off of his design, but I actually thought like in Tenacious D, the devil looked pretty much exactly like him.
He's just like so intimidating. He's so creepy, like especially later on when we see him.
Yeah, after he steps out of the blacklight.
Yes. Before there was Andy Serkis playing all these larger than life characters like Gollum and King Kong and Caesar. There was Tim Curry. He's a masterclass at bringing these larger than life characters to screen. I mean, Dr. Frankenfurter from the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Pennywise from the 90s version of It.
Aren't you going to say hello?
Nigel Thornberry, my personal favorite.
That was smashing.
And here, Darkness, he's one of the, in my opinion, he's one of the greatest fantasy characters put to screen. If nothing else, he just looks visually beautiful. I mean, he's terrifying, but beautifully realized by the makeup department. And it took 5 hours of makeup being applied.
So I met with him. He was really intrigued and said, yes, okay, this sounds weird, but okay, I'll do it. And then, little by little, he gradually realized what was going to happen to him.
Tim Curry felt super claustrophobic and tried ripping it off, and he took some of his skin with it.
Oh my gosh. I can imagine though being stuck in a makeup chair for like 5 hours and having all that put on you. I could see it being overwhelming. I just think he's like bigger than life in this movie, and honestly, I think Tim Curry's performance really like carried the film for me.
Mm-hmm. I think he definitely steals the show. So yeah, the Lord of Darkness, he sends his right hand, Goblin Blix, to retrieve a unicorn horn, which is the biggest source of power in the world, in this world. But the movie really starts off when one of our protagonists, Lily, as we're talking about, goes out into the forest to go make out with Tom Cruise.
Please, please, if you're here, say something to me, please.
Just a wild, mangy Tom Cruise jumping out of nowhere.
I thought he kind of reminded me of Tarzan right here.
Yeah. So Jack lives in the woods, which you can clearly tell. As far as his personality goes, he doesn't. I don't think he has much of one aside from being like the wide-eyed protagonist. What do you think?
Yeah, I didn't really like get too much out of him, honestly. He just seems like he helps guide the story along, and like, you know, he's the dashing, like, he's not a prince, but you know, he's the like the savior. He's gonna go after her and kind of just progress the film. But he really didn't like display much emotion to me, honestly. I felt like, I don't know, I just felt like this acting role for Tom Cruise was kind of mellow, in my opinion.
It's one of those movies where I think a lot of actors could have played him. Like, it didn't feel like it was written with Tom Cruise in mind, or like it had to be Tom Cruise, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know if another actor would have elevated it, or if it was just like a script thing. But yeah, he's kind of bland. He's just like, yeah, like you said, he's taking you through it. So yeah, she goes out to the forest to make out with Tom Cruise, and because he really digs her, Jack takes Lily to go see the unicorns. The most magical and sacred things in the world. So, in fact, Jack says,
nothing is more magical. As long as they roam the earth, evil can never harm the pure of heart.
I think he made a huge mistake showing them to her.
And yeah, what does Lily do? She wants to go touch them. risking the balance of the entire world. But I'm not gonna lie, I think my girlfriend would have done the same thing. But no, she really kind of sets all this bullshit off, and by going fucking with the unicorns. So yeah, Blick shoots one of them with a tranq dart and goes after it while Jack regrets his life choices.
You know, I will give Lily the benefit of the doubt. I feel like Jack should have told her something beforehand. He just blindfolded her, and she was like, "Oh, don't you trust me?" I feel like he could have laid down some rules to prevent this from happening.
Because later on, she's like, "I don't know what I did wrong," and he's like, "You already know this kind of shit is forbidden." He tells her that.
It is known, Lily. These are sacred animals.
No, I guess you're right, but I feel like he says it after the fact. Like, does she know that? Or, because, like, they're legends, right? So who's really gonna, like, who thinks that unicorns actually exist?
She's a princess. She's supposed to know this shit that's in her magical life.
You know what? You might be right. I feel like it could have just been a legend. He's like, "Oh, hey, the legends are real. Check this out." And then her mesmerized, like you said, who doesn't want to touch a unicorn?
She makes him go fetch for her ring. And because he's a simp, he does it.
Dude, that's exactly what I thought. When he did it, I was like, "You're a simp."
I will marry whoever finds this ring. Jack!
The way he runs for it like a dog. That is a super cool shot, though. I really like that.
It's pretty awesome.
While he's looking for it, the world is plunged into darkness and chaos as Blix takes the horn, and then she goes missing. And then Jack heads off on his journey to go find her and save the world, though he doesn't know it yet. In Jack's journey, he's joined by Gump, a naked elf boy.
Golem's younger brother.
Yeah. And his dwarf friends, Brown Tom and Screwball, as well as a fairy named Una. Let's talk about Gump.
Honeythorn Gump, at your service.
Gump is pissed that Jack took Lily to see the unicorns.
I took Lily to see the unicorn.
You did what? Do you think you can upset the order of the universe and not pay the price?
Until Jack mentions that he did it for love. Then he's like, "Oh, for love? Well, you should have mentioned that earlier. Let's drink to that shit."
Yeah, dude, that totally, like, threw me for a loop.
Well, love is another matter. Brown Tom, a toast to love.
I'm sure if you kill someone in that world, if you're like, "I did it for love," then they'll let you go scot-free.
That felt like weird editing there, and I have an idea why, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. We saw his dwarf friend there, Brown Tom. Brown Tom is kind of a badass. He likes to drink, and he can deflect arrows with his frying pan.
That was some PUBG shit right there.
You can't keep me out here, look at that! Oh, keep them coming, fellas! Check this out!
That shot right there, that could have ended so badly.
Yeah, no, the dwarf characters quickly became endearing to me. Like, I felt like I didn't want anything bad to happen to them, because they're innocent, kind of cool dudes. They just want to drink and eat, and they don't even want to be there.
I knew it. I should have stayed at home.
But they're still loyal and brave at times when they have to be. But I like the dwarf characters. I think they probably had more personality than our two main human leads.
I would totally agree with you on that. I think they did a lot to, like, help out.
Oh, one thing I forgot to mention about Gump, and I don't know if you read this or not, that he was played by this Swiss actor named David Bennett, but he was voiced by an uncredited actress named Alice Playton. Because one of the...
Oh, yeah, I did see that. He had, like, a voice actor, so I was kind of surprised about that. I thought that was the guy's actual voice.
I've seen this movie a lot when I was a kid, and I've never noticed that.
You want to know a funny fact?
Yeah.
When Gump first appeared on the screen, I had to look up if that was Frankie Muniz. Yeah, dude, I did. I was like, "There's no way," because he'd be, like, so young, and, like,
yeah.
I had to look it up because I thought he looks very much like him. I feel so stupid.
Maybe he did do it and he just forgot about it. Did you know he has like memory loss?
I actually do, yeah. I heard about that.
Yeah, that's crazy to be like the star of like a show and not remember half of it. Princess Lily, going back to her, she's I think the weakest character maybe. She doesn't have that much to do, especially after she's kidnapped. She's mostly there as a plot device to get Jack to fight darkness, which is a shame because I don't think the actress is bad. I don't think anybody's bad, and especially considering this was her first movie. Ferris Bueller, I believe, was her second. And she mostly spends like the last third of the movie being slowly seduced by darkness. And she kind of turned him into a simp too.
Yeah, she did. He fell for her spell.
I offer you this rose, princess. My heart. My soul.
I actually thought in the third act, that's when like she really started like showing like her true self, like showing us that she was stronger than like we thought she was. Because I thought she was pretty weak throughout the whole movie. She didn't really do much. She was just kind of like a damsel in distress the whole time.
Yeah, she definitely redeems her character later on in the movie. But that scene where she frees the unicorn in the face of darkness, that was pretty badass.
Yeah, that was really cool.
That scene is kind of funny to me because
Gump was ready to take her out, dude.
Yeah, Gump's like, Jack, kill that bitch. If you don't, I will.
Kill her. Forget her. Think about the unicorn. Do it! Lily. I'll do it.
But yeah, Gump was ready, man. He was pissed. He was probably still mad at Lily.
Yeah, Gump wanted everyone. He wanted everyone's head. He was not happy about the whole situation. There's some cool. I think there's some cool action in the movie, but I think the sets that they take place in are the real stars.
I thought the sets were probably the most fantastic thing about the movie, in my opinion. They were just so real. Another interesting fact about the movie, the set design was actually, I think, partially inspired by the sequoias at Yosemite. And I think Ridley Scott actually sent out like teams out there to kind of like scout in order to try and maybe replicate some of the lushness.
Well, they scouted and they wanted to go out there, but he's like, I don't think we can control that, like all the environment and everything. So
yeah, that makes sense.
They built it on the set and replicated it. Yeah.
Yeah, I had read that if they were to try and film out there, it would have been way too expensive.
So, unfortunately, during a lunch break, fire broke out and destroyed the entire thing, the whole set.
Came back and said, the bond stage is on fire. So I said, basically expletive, right? And carried on editing. He said, no, the bond station on fire. So I walked out down the corridor, and as I got to the end, I could see over the buildings this giant column of smoke like a battleship was sinking or an aircraft carrier.
That's horrible.
Yeah, luckily they only had 10 days of filming left. Usually movies take like months to film. And so they just rebuilt the small sections of the forest that they needed. So it wasn't too bad. I think I read that they had only realistically lost like 3 days of filming.
Oh, wow.
So all things considered, not too bad.
They were able to recover from that.
There's another scene where they're fighting in a swamp that I really liked. And man, I love the lighting and the atmosphere. It's super creepy. And there's that slimy hag thing that they fight.
Yeah, that looks so good.
What do you think about the soundtrack?
I liked it. I feel like it creates like a sense of fantasy. You know, everything goes with the film really well. I don't feel like anything's like out of the ordinary. Like I feel like it's very organic. Like it makes sense to me.
So I personally love the soundtrack, but I think it's also very 80s, like really synthy. But like you said, it definitely, I think it's mystical and dark, and I think it sets the atmosphere. But there's a couple of scenes. I think there was one in the swamp, and there's a couple afterwards where it just feels like really 80s. Nothing more so than that beautifully cheesy song at the end. That is such a guilty pleasure song of mine, because it's like, that's such 80s like rock, or I don't even know, pop, and like it's so cheesy, and the sun's coming out.
Legends can be
Though I think it pairs well with the movie because the movie itself is very cheesy with all its themes. Like
Maybe this is just to remind you that it's an 80s film.
it's very dated in that way here.
Because if you were to take that music out, it'd almost be timeless because you couldn't really tell.
Right. I kind of want this movie to be remade and this story to kind of reach a wider audience, but I feel like they'd overdo it with CG. Like I feel like if this were made today, darkness and the unicorns, the goblins, a bunch of the sets, I feel like a lot of that would be CG. And CG has gotten good, but those are kind of the things I liked about this, all the practical stuff.
I actually think it's aged really well. Like, if this was all done CG, I don't think it'd feel as real.
There's kind of this rumor that this movie at least slightly inspired The Legend of Zelda. This came out in 85, and then I believe the game came out in 86, which back then the development cycle was a lot shorter. But I looked all over, and a lot of people on Reddit and the internet have looked all over. Nobody can find an exact quote, but there's a lot of similarities, I think. I mean, in at least in that basic story, the elf boy or the woodland boy going to save the princess from a demon, at least in that way. And he uses a sword, and it's very sword and shield fantasy based. But I think it's the closest thing we have to a Legend of Zelda adaptation. I think this movie planted fantasy seeds in my mind from an early age. And perhaps it's one of the reasons why works of Tolkien appealed to me so much, especially when the Peter Jackson version of Lord of the Rings came out when we were in like third grade, as well as Harry Potter came out the same year. And I have a special fondness for this movie because when I was younger, I'd spend a lot of time at my grandparents' house while my parents worked. And my grandparents, as you know, are Mexican and had a lot of movies in Spanish. And they had 3 movies in English. An animated film called Once Upon a Forest, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and this movie.
Oh, wow. That's actually really cool.
Yeah. For me, it has a lot of 80s cheese. Only the power of good and love will prevail, all that stuff. It still holds a special place in my heart, but it's a really lean movie. It's only an hour and a half. And it's a very straightforward A to B journey, light versus dark kind of movie. Really simple in that way. But I'm going to hand it to you, kind of. What do you think? What are your critiques?
I had never heard of it before. So when you asked me to do this episode with you, I had no idea what to expect at all. And I will say, I think the way that it was filmed, the cinematography, absolutely stunning. I thought the shots and the angles, everything was done very purposely. I thought the costumes looked great. But I think the film looks stunning. And I thought I guess in the first act, I thought that Jack and Lily's acting was super cringy. I thought it was really bad. Yeah, the stuff that they were saying to each other, I just felt like it wasn't very developed. I mean, all I got out of it was I like you. You like me. Let's make out in the forest.
That's true.
I don't know. I mean, it's just 2 kids meeting out in the forest, making out. Yeah, I thought the story, the way it was executed, I didn't think that the first and the second act really were that strong. And it wasn't until the third act where I thought everything was coming together. I thought the acting was more solid, and I thought the fight between Jack and Darkness was really good, and just kind of them cool. setting up their whole plan to kind of get sunlight to hit him. I thought okay, there was more setup, if anything, there than in the movie, in my opinion.
That's true. That's a good point. It's like I said, it's a very simple A to B movie, not it is straight up a journey. And I guess you can compare it in that way. Well, sort of. You can compare and contrast, I think, with Lord of the Rings, where in theory it is an A to B journey, right? They're banding together to go destroy the ring, but a lot of complicated or a lot of complex shit happens along the way to muck it up.
Yeah.
Where that doesn't happen in this movie. It still remains they have their trials, but it's still straightforward.
I felt like it wasn't as complex as I believed it should have been. I mean, they definitely had some trouble, but I don't think they really experienced anything too hard. Maybe they were just really lucky. Because like
Yeah.
Jack too, like, you know, he had never handled a weapon before, and you know, he was
He
able
cut
to
off the hag's head.
yeah, and he was able to take on the like not the devil, but darkness, you know, and darkness was
Yeah.
a huge beast. So he was actually trading like sword blows with him. So I was thinking like, how is he doing this? Like, he's a small kid, and like you have darkness beating down on you, and you're somehow able to take the blow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm sure it wasn't feasible then, but if this was somehow able to been like split maybe into multiple movies, and like if they fleshed it out a little bit more, I actually feel like it could have been like maybe more believable for me.
That leads me to the next thing I was going to talk about. I want to bring up the existence of a director's cut. As I mentioned earlier, we watched the theatrical cut. We watched what was played in American cinemas in 1986. Apparently, the original movie was 2 hours long, but test audiences didn't respond well, so they cut it. And they still didn't like it, so they cut it again down to the 89-minute version that we watched. I mean, that's a lot that they cut out. I'm sure a lot of that stuff. I mean, I don't think it would have made the movie perfect or anything like that, but and it's not as like drastic as like, you know, the Snyder cut, very topical thing. But that's a lot of time lost there.
Maybe I need to see the director's cut of this film, and that might make me change my mind about like it not being as fleshed out, because like that is a significant amount of time, and like if you had an extra 30 minutes, you could do a lot with it. So maybe in the 80s, like having movies that long, people got bored, or maybe it was just hard to keep people interested for that long. Because like for a fantasy film, I couldn't imagine doing like an hour 30-minute film today.
No, hell no. I guess like even just regular, like not like drama is the standard for most everything, is aside from animated films, is like 2 hours now or close to.
Yeah.
I think I read that Ridley Scott had said something about European audiences being more sophisticated than Americans, and they're able to handle like a slower pace, which I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case.
That makes sense to me. But then again, I feel like today people like, you know, people are really invested. Like, I mean, you know, people love action movies, but I think people also really like good stories. So, you know, if you had more like more information that was like integral to the plot, I really feel like people would like take the extra time to like sit back and like watch, because like if anything, I think people really like having like a full fleshed out world, you know, like they want to believe that this universe is real.
I think you're completely right. I think we can look to Lord of the Rings. They're very long movies, but the story and the world and everything was there. And like you said, audiences are willing to be, you know, if it's there, they'll invest the time. Game of Thrones as well. It's pretty heavy on dialogue and story. People are invested in it.
I think it all comes down to the execution, because, you know, like if it's not good and you have a lot of it, people are going to want to trim the fat, you know, they're not going to want all this extra crap if like it's not worth it to them.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it. Well, I think that's all the time we have today. And we'll see you guys next time.
Catch you guys later.
I'm sure I'll change my part in post edit, because I never know how to end this shit.